Welcome to the Early AI podcast. My name is Seth Earley. Unfortunately, Chris Featherstone couldn't make it today. I'm really excited to introduce our guest for today. We are going to be discussing the ways of interacting with computers and technologies in conversational ways. We'll talk about the need for high quality data. We'll talk about data architecture, knowledge architecture, and how AI is going to be impacting organizations short term and long term. And we'll talk about how we need to think about increasing the AI literacy within the organization and driving the urgency of adoption to take advantage of these AI opportunities. So our guest today comes with a huge amount of experience. He's been with his company was acquired by Witham in the last 7 years. He's originally from Switzerland. He's now a longtime resident of the DC area, and he's at a crossroads where he's transitioning out of his current role and contemplating what he might do next, which may involve doing some work in the SaaS space. He has deep ties to the technology sector. He has a history of expertise in knowledge management. Daniel Cohen-Dumani, please welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Seth. It's a pleasure to be here. I know you and I have known each other for quite a while, and I'm excited to be on your show.
Yeah, how long has it been, would you say?
Oh, I want to say 10, 15 years for sure.
Easily, yeah, that's right.
Cross path in many occasions over the last 20 years for sure.
Yeah, it's really been nice to reconnect with you. So I want to start off with some of the misconceptions around one of the spaces that you have a lot of expertise and experience with, which is knowledge management. And what would you say, what are the misconceptions today versus 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or are they the same, or how are they different? What's going on in the space these days? What do people not get?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I've seen the world. I mean, knowledge management has been around for almost 30 years, right? You and I know that. It's been a goal of organization to be able to better manage their knowledge for a long time. And technology have come along the way over the last 25 years and have made incremental improvement. But some of the misconception that I've seen is thinking about knowledge management as an end into itself, right? It's not, there's a buzzword, right? And we used to talk about knowledge management, then people say, hey, let's not talk about it anymore. But now it's coming back, right? It has a negative connotation, as you know, right? The KM thing, right? So it's not an end into itself. It's an intent to leverage and build, market value for your organization and give you competitive strength. That's what knowledge management is all about. There's often a myth about, hey, we're going to just hire smart people and that's going to solve everything, right? Or we're going to put process in place and that's going to solve everything. There's also a myth of, hey, let's buy very expensive technology and that's going to solve everything. And those have been around for a while, and it's really haven't changed. What really have changed is the advance in AI, right? I think AI is changing everything for knowledge management, but obviously for everything else, right? So that's something that really struck to me.
Yeah, and I totally agree. If you're too far removed from the customer, if you either have to serve the customer or serve someone who's serving the customer with your knowledge initiatives, otherwise it's too academic, right? It's too theoretical, and you get a lot of navel gazing and a lot of definition. Let's define knowledge management. But you did make an interesting comment. You said sometimes people say, well, let's just hire smart people, or let's just put a process in place, or let's just buy technology. That is the people, process, technology. So it has to be some combination of those, right? So What is missing? When you say that, what is missing? Is it that they try those things independently, but it's really a holistic approach? Or what else is missing there?
I think, part of it is having a clear strategy of why you want to do this. Right? And thinking about, okay, knowledge management is great, but what are the benefits? What are the outcome? Why are we doing it? It's the why, right? The typical why are you doing this?
I like to say the so what. When you have
so what? Yes.
So what? Yeah. What do you
exactly? So what? And not just doing it because other people are doing it, right? So I think, yes, it is a people process technology, but it has to be combined. It's all of it together.
Right.
Very important aspect of change management with any technology, and specifically around knowledge management.
Right, right. And so when you talk about how AI is changing things, now when I first saw ChatGPT at the end of last year or mid last year or whatever it was, I had a little bit of an existential crisis. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, oh my God, is my work in knowledge management and information architecture no longer necessary? And of course, the more research I did, the more I realized that it was more necessary than ever. And
Yes.
so, you know, start looking at that, like what do you see in that space? And then, I still look at the fact that all the things we're trying to do with technology is to make up for our past sins in poor data, content, and knowledge hygiene, right? So when you say AI is changing things, in what way and what is the role of knowledge management at this
Yeah,
point?
that's a great question, Seth. And if we take a step back, when you say ChatGPT, that's large language
Yeah.
model. And then I like to make sure everyone understand what is a large language model.
Hmm.
It's a process and technology and algorithm that been trained on all publicly available knowledge in the web. Publicly available is important.
Hmm.
So we can think about it as general intelligence, right? It's generally available concept, right? You can ask a question, you get an answer, and it's usually pretty accurate, although it hallucinates quite a bit. But it's usually, hey, it sounds really plausible,
Hmm.
right? It sounds really good, and it sounds like it should be true, right? When we think about knowledge management and how LLM is impacting it, now we have a technology that can be pointed to your content, specifically your document, and
Hmm.
one by one understand what's in it or start extracting important content, right? That's really what the game changing is, right? So the game changer is, right, is now we have a very extremely unique, powerful technology that can read unstructured content and start making sense. I won't say reasoning, we're not there yet, but at least start making sense and extracting concept and entities and relationship of entities and start doing manipulating content of unstructured documents.
Yeah, and it's so, it's interesting. So what you're referring to is generically called RAG, or retrieval augmented generation, right? Because we're
Yep.
using a source of ground truth in the enterprise. And what I have seen and heard and read and researched is that, that use of LLMs is going to have a greater impact on the enterprise than any other AI initiative. And I
That's
agree with
right.
that. And I think that's why, you know, executives are not necessarily thinking of large language models and that class of technology correctly if they are just using it to answer questions without reference to corporate knowledge. Because
Yep.
again, it can only do so much, right? It doesn't know your products, it doesn't know your services, it doesn't know your solutions, it doesn't know your competitive advantage, it doesn't know your differentiating IP, right? And you don't want to let that out. You want to keep that safe. And so doing this in such a way where you can use it to understand what the user is asking for, facilitate a retrieval, and then make that answer more conversational. That's
Exactly.
brilliant, right? That reduces so much work, but it's still thinking of the large language model and capability differently than what a lot of organizations are doing. A lot of organizations are not necessarily thinking of it that way. They're trying to get it. I mean, I think it's coming along, right? I believe that people are realizing that, but I still think that transition to that thinking is a little bit slow. And then tell me more about, the role of knowledge hygiene, knowledge process, knowledge architecture in that situation, because it still doesn't obviate the need for that stuff, right?
It does not, absolutely not. And I think it makes it even more important, right? So the first thing you can think of is content security, right? As
Mhm.
you know, there's been number of stories of organizational enterprises starting to use LLM against their data. And what they've realized is people have access to more things they should,
Ah, yes.
right? So that's content hygiene or content governance and security.
Mm.
Well, guess what? They had access to it before, they just couldn't find it, right? So
Ah,
the LLM made it easier to find it,
right.
but they had access to this magic spreadsheet with a lot of salary data that they were not supposed to.
Right.
They just couldn't find it. They didn't know it was there nowadays, right? Because the LLM are really good at understanding what you want and trying to find the best results based on your question. But when you think about data, more structured data, which hold a lot of information that LLM can make sense of as well. Having it's bringing back this concept of data architecture, right? And it's not just on structure; it's structured data. It's thinking at data structure and structure as one big data architecture, and thinking about where is the data, what's relevant. If you're in a business of serving customer, where's my customer data? In how many places do I have it? What's the master, record for that customer data, right? And the LLM needs to know that. Otherwise, they're going to find a lot of things and they won't know how to prioritize those, right? So it's bringing that need to clean up, organize your data more than ever.
Mm-hmm.
And we're seeing a lot of demand from organizations to create a comprehensive data architecture as a result of AI
Mm-hmm.
advances.
So they are making the connection to that. They are putting the funds in there. They're starting to
They
understand.
realize the need, yes.
Yeah, yeah, and of course it can be very significant. Uh, you know, so that says that there's some organizations that are doing that. Um, what's that level of awareness generally look like? So that sounds like that's a forward-looking company that understands the need for the data architecture. They understand the need to do some content processing or content curation. But that seems like it's not a big part of the
Yeah.
space. What percentage of executives or companies would you say have that level of understanding, awareness, and commitment to the foundation versus the ones that are kind of
In,
what does that
in
look
my
like?
personal experience, speaking with a lot of executive over the past 18 months, 24 months, I'm still floored of the lack of awareness and priority of data and AI in those businesses.
Yeah.
I want to refer back, and then when you think about it, GPT-4 was released a year and a half, 14 months, 16 months away,
Yeah.
right? It's only been that long, right?
Yeah.
Bill Gates wrote an article in November of 2023, which is 7, 8 months ago. We're in June now,
Mm-hmm.
2024. And the title of this article was AI is about to completely change how you use computer.
Mm-hmm.
And we can like or dislike Bill Gates. I think his prediction tend to be right on target. And he said, and I quote, in the next 5 years, this will change completely. You won't have to use different apps for different tasks. You'll simply tell your device in everyday language what you want to do, and your
Mm-hmm.
device will do it. And depending on how much information you choose to share with it, the software will be able to respond personally because it will have a rich understanding of your life.
Right.
In the near future, anyone who's online will be able to have a personal assistant powered by AI that's far beyond today's technology. And
Right.
that's a 5 year prediction. Well,
Sure.
actually, 4.5 year prediction. And when you think about that is the word of agent, right? Agent is something we hear, AI agent. An agent is just a software that responds to natural language that can accomplish many different tasks.
Mm-hmm.
So for those executives, they don't understand that this world of being in front of a computer, typing something, emailing someone, getting on a Zoom meeting or Teams meeting or getting on Slack or Teams messages, that's going to change, right? Dramatically, it's already changing now, and I think there's a broad lack of understanding of this impact, right? And when you think about it, this is impacting every single business,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you're going to be able to talk to a machine
Mm-hmm.
that will know who you are, know what you want, and
Mm-hmm.
you'll be able to tell it to accomplish discrete tasks that
Mm-hmm.
clearly you ask someone else to do,
Right.
which means you'll delegate your work to agents as opposed to delegating to your coworkers, right? So, for me, it's, executive are still in their bubble, right? Oh, I get Chat GPT, oh, it came out. And I think they're still thinking it the same way they've done it, in the past 20 years. New
Mm,
technology, let's do a pilot, right?
mm,
Let's let's give it to IT, and IT will figure out how to roll it out. Let's block everyone to use anything else because we're worried, right? And
yeah.
I think AI is fundamentally different. There's a lot of study that has been made that a AI has that's well adopted comes from a grassroots approach. People
Mm,
start using it with no constraint and
mm,
trying to find ways to use AI to their benefit, as opposed to a CEO coming and said, "This is how you're using AI," which
right.
is sort of this big shift
Yeah.
in approach to technology that I see a tremendous lack.
Yeah, yeah, and I want to make a quick comment about your anecdote or your commentary about security. We were doing a project for a pharmaceutical company, and we built a portfolio review application, did all the metadata and the information architecture. And this application reduced the need to go to like 5 or 6 other applications and multiple spreadsheets. It did all that stuff, all the motherhood and apple pie, centralized this and made it easier to consume. And we componentized the content, et cetera, et cetera. So great application, highly, highly, highly sensitive information, market moving information, very tight security on this. Executives, not even every executive on the leadership teams were able to see some of these things, right? So there's some things that were so sensitive about acquiring companies or clinical trial results that even at that level of senior leadership, not everybody could see it. So very, very locked down. The company installed Copilot, Microsoft Copilot. This is built in a SharePoint application. And then we got a frantic call on like a Friday night or a Saturday and saying that, that this new Copilot agent is able to access all of this information in this application. And they're freaking out. And of course, this became our our emergency to fix it, but we had to lock it down even further and remove. But the point is, nobody anticipated that, right? They're saying this thing's going to have admin rights across all these applications. They didn't think about the fact that it shouldn't have admin rights across all those
That's right.
applications, and that this is sensitive information that shouldn't get out. Now, luckily, we were able to capture it. I had to go drive over to my developer's home on Saturday to find him, but we got it fixed. But I think it's that point of saying, yes, we have to be careful about this because we can't just give them access to everything because then we're giving everybody access to everything. So I just want to make that quick commentary. And then, you were talking about how they need to think about the fact that this is going to be completely changing how we interact with computers and technology. And we're going to be asking questions of agents, delegating tasks to agents, and so on. But from getting from here to there is going to be a bit of a hike, right? There's going to be a bit of a trip. So how should organizations think about their investment in the space today? Because there's a lot of stuff that's foundational that needs to be put in
Yes.
place. So where should they be, to go along on that path? What should they be doing now?
A very smart person said, your job is not at risk,
Yeah,
uh, but your job will be lost to someone using AI.
yeah,
And I think the same has to be true for companies, right? The
yeah,
company that will survive, and we're talking survival here,
yeah.
are the one that are able to embrace and leverage AI to their competitive
Right.
advantage, right? So this is we're talking about survival, right? It's not just an if or
Existential.
when.
It's existential.
Existential is the word, yes. So, I feel like, if you're an executive, and you have not experimented yourself, if you're not using a chat GPT
Mhm.
or Copilot. I'm a big fan of Perplexity. I use Perplexity on a
Mhm.
daily basis. This is my go-to AI.
Mhm.
I've mastered it. I use it. But if you're an executive and you're not experimenting yourself, you are never going to understand the impact,
Mhm.
right? Because at the end, you need to really understand it yourself,
Mhm.
that you have your own co-pilot
Mhm.
next to you that can do tasks that were really hard for you,
Mhm.
including explaining to you those concepts that you don't understand.
Right.
Right? Go to Copilot today if you're an executive and ask, what are the threats to my business? My business is X, Y, and Z. If I
Hmm.
don't embrace AI, and guess what? You'll get a very accurate, good
Hmm.
answer. Maybe a little hallucinating, but no, for the most part, it's going to be a good answer, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so I think my advice to executive is experiment yourself, right?
Mhm.
Otherwise, you're doing your company and your team a disfavor. Second, I will say don't try to stiffer innovation or block innovation by saying we can only do it this way, right? Because guess what? People are going to find ways to do it on their own using whatever
Right.
tool they want.
Right.
That's just the nature of people, right?
Right.
And there was a study from Microsoft recently that said that 70% of workers have been using AI, which is staggering when you think
Right.
about it, right?
Right.
And most of them are doing without anyone knowing they're doing it, which
Mm.
means they are likely are putting proprietary data into publicly available LLM and doing things they're not supposed to. But guess
Right.
what? They're trying to do their job better. So I
Right.
think giving more tool and
Hmm.
more freedom to
Hmm.
worker is how you're gonna become,
Hmm.
AI ready or an
Hmm.
AI first company. Um, Otherwise, you're gonna be, you know, trailing
Yeah.
behind.
Yeah. You know, I think one of the things that is very challenging is that, there's less of an understanding of the need for a good solid data foundation, right? I mean, it's there, people are giving it lip service as they always have, right? Sit around the board table and they're like, oh yeah, data is important. Everybody nods their head. Yeah, data is super important. Yeah, we live on data, right? And then you put in front of them the investment that's required, and they go, whoa, it's not that important. Right? Right? So there's this disconnect between this kind of conceptual understanding that data is important and this visceral understanding that you have to spend money to fix it. And of course, people have been burned, right? Executives have been burned
Of
before.
course.
So, how should they tend not to invest in these data foundations, right? And when you do, it's usually focused on an immediate project, which makes sense. But how should they think about data foundation across projects? Because again, that's where we end up with more silos, more inconsistent organizing principles, more bespoke architectures, and again, it further fragments knowledge and data and content in many cases, unless we think of kind of a common layer. So, what are your thoughts about that? You don't want to blow up the scope too much, right? You have to keep the scope focused. But what are your thoughts about, building that in a way that's extensible, expandable, that enables cross application communication and data flows and so on. What are your thoughts about
Yeah,
that?
it's a great question, Seth. And I've experienced a lot of different scenarios that are similar to this. And
Mm.
I always say it starts with a good enterprise architecture. And what
Hmm.
I say that is the reason there's silos and
Hmm.
systems not connected is because there's urgency to fix a problem.
Yep.
And we said, okay, we're going to buy this software. It's going to solve my problem. It's going to be great. But we're not thinking about the impact of the rest of the
Right.
organization. And
Downstream, upstream processes, data
yes,
movement. Yeah.
and that's of the charge of software as a service. It's so
Right.
easy to put a credit card, buy the software,
Right.
and solve the problem, and all of a
Yep.
sudden you have data here that exists here, and they're not connected,
Yeah.
and that creates a problem. So I think enterprise architecture of understanding why you're doing this and how you're doing it is the impact on the rest of the organization is something that small, medium, even large organization don't have a good handle on, right?
Mm. Hmm.
Because there's a need of speed, right?
Mm.
There's a need of I need to solve this problem now, right? And I think, when you think back over the last 10
Tech
years,
debt be damned. Anyway, sorry.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Technological debt be damned. But keep
Yes,
going. Sorry.
technology debt, and I think we've gone through some economic cycle. Of course, the pandemic upheld everything. So there's been many companies that have put off saying, you know what, this is not the most important thing.
Right.
I'm going to wait and wait and wait. And now with AI coming in, they say we can't wait anymore, right? But So it gets back to organize and think about your enterprise architecture so that you have a data architecture so that you can have a good foundation.
Right.
Now, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and there may be some hope that, advances in artificial intelligence will be good enough to say, you know what, you can have all those systems. I'll be able to make sense of it. I'm just going to take all the data and disambiguate everything, and I'm going to fix it all, right? And you and I have been talking a lot about knowledge graphs and the
Mhm.
ability to leverage knowledge graph to do this. So there may be a hope down the road where, it will be okay to continue to have these silos, but we'll be able to bring it back together because of, advances in AI, right? So, but that should not negate the need to do it. It's important. It's important for any organization to have transactional system, right? They
Mhm.
need to have consistency in data, otherwise your
Mm.
your 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 transaction may not be
Right.
accurate, or what you do may not be as
Right.
optimal as possible.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting that more effort and attention and resources have gone into that transactional side because, again, so much is dependent upon that, and people get measured on that, and financial results are need to be accurate and timely and all of that stuff. But imagine but then when you start looking at data, at content and unstructured information and knowledge, you know you don't have people. Imagine if people say, "Oh, I don't want to tag this or I don't want to do that." Imagine if you had people in the accounting department going, "Oh my goodness, all those numbers, you have to put them in the systems, they have to add up, right?" I mean, you don't think of it the same way because it's just how the business is
Yes,
run, and there's people whose
yes,
jobs it is to do that, and we've so lacked that in on the unstructured side. But to your point of, we get to the point where we can ingest all that data and then let the AI make sense of it. I think that to a degree, yes, but with the right reference architecture, I still
of
think
course.
you need to have
Yes,
that foundational ontology
foundational is
knowledge graph,
critical.
and then you may be able to do that. We showed that example with product cleansing and enrichment the other day, where we're ingesting all of these different data sources into a vector space, but we're doing it along with the knowledge graph and the ontologies for that particular organization. And then with that, you can bring in these diverse sources, and then you can prompt the LLM to using a templated prompting, right? Using a template to with variables to say, give me this information about this product, and then run that iteratively and produce cleansed data, right? So it is possible to do that, but under certain narrow circumstances. And I
Right.
think to your point about the enterprise architectures, we have to start with that domain model, which says here are the big picture organizing principles. This is what everybody needs. And then you start digging down more deeply into the specific application areas,
Right.
but recognizing that all of this stuff has to be harmonized. So yeah, totally agree it's an area that is moving so quickly. It's almost hard to say where you should place your bet, Do you have thoughts about that? Because there's a lot of things that vendors will promise or say they can do, and or have a capability. I like to call those aspirational capabilities, right? They're
Yes.
planning on it. They may speak about it in the present tense, but it's in the future. It needs to be in the future tense. They don't have it today, right?
Right.
I would say they're outright lying, but I'm going to give them a little benefit of the doubt and say they're aspirational capabilities. Like they're almost there, but they're not there. So how do you tell the difference between, the vendor BS, also known as aspirational capabilities, and reality? So what's the due diligence, or what's the approach that organizations need to take to kind of separate the what's possible from what's practical and what's real?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that you bring a good point, Seth. And it's interesting because we are in a very different age, and everyone call it the age of AI. And I think the mental the approaches we had in the past,
Mhm.
specifically for technology, don't apply.
Mhm.
Right? We used to be able to say, let's make prediction over the last 5 years. Let's create
Mhm.
a 5 years technology plan.
Mhm.
You can't do that anymore, right?
Right.
Because
Right.
frankly, neither you or I have any idea where we're going to be a year from now. We can make
Right.
prediction, guess. I think Bill Gates made a long-term prediction.
Mm-hmm.
It may not be 5 years, maybe 7 or 8 or 9, but it will happen. Um, and when you think about AI and specifically large language model, it's one of the first technology that is being used for things that were not intended to. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Usually you build a technology, you use it because it's going to do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, even you ask OpenAI and Sam Altman, he said, I'm amazed how people are using ChatGPT. We never thought it would be used that way, right?
Right.
So
Right.
that's a very, very important thing to remember, right? We are in an age now where technology is coming where we literally have no idea how we can use and leverage it.
Mm.
Back to your question on vendor hype, yes, there's tremendous amount of hype. Yes, and when you think about all the vendors that are talking about, hey, we're doing retrieval augmentation, generation RAG on your knowledge, and it's gonna solve everything. That is not true, right? Because RAG is still suffering from the same challenge that LLM had.
Yeah.
It's grounded on your data, but it's still going to make things up,
Right.
or importantly, not find what you want, and knowing that it's there, it's there. And I've done it. I'm sure you experiment with Copilot, and I'm using Copilot, and I'm asking a question, and I know it's there, and it's
Mm-hmm.
not able to find it, right? Because my prompt wasn't long enough, right? Or I wasn't specific enough, or just it couldn't connect the dots, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we're talking about a lot of time you ask question, you ask about connecting the dots. LLM are not great at connecting the dots too. So I think that, people have to be careful when they hear we're AI, we're using LLM and we're doing things that looks very intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
I will be very wary of that because that's likely, yes, it will become very intelligent, not there quite yet. And I think we're going to hit a plateau of the capability of LLM, right? When we think about LLM, they've been trained on all the content available, right? There's not enough new content to train those large language model on. Yeah,
Mm.
you can do it now and you'll incrementally get more content, but that's it. The content has been ingested, right? We've got
Right.
everything, right?
Yeah.
And the transformer architecture has been, optimized and optimized and optimized. So how much more can we do? There's going to have to be something else coming, right? So, because at some point, it's going to be very challenging to optimize,
Mm-hmm.
the current architecture. And we know some people are working on new ways of improving or getting better answers
Mm-hmm.
that LLM can do today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is interesting when you think about all of the content and data that has been ingested, and there have been articles and podcasts about the fact that we're running that the big AI vendors and platform providers are running out of data to ingest. And so, where else can that data come from? And again, this is where they're not ingesting your proprietary content, right? Because that's your proprietary content, and so that's where ingesting that and accessing that is where the advantage comes from. But there's also, because so much content is being created by these LLMs flooding the internet, there's also what people have been talking about in terms of model collapse. In other words, the data is not diverse enough. It's repeating. It's like the
Yep.
dragon eating its tail, right? It's ingesting its own output, and you're not injecting creativity into the process. So, again, whether and when that's going to happen. I mean, a lot of times you can just tell when the content is AI written, right? Because it has that certain cadence to it, and there are tools that will identify whether it's AI
Yeah.
generated content.
You know, you
And I,
you you bring a great point. It's one of those unintended
yeah,
use of LLM is
right.
the generation of what we call synthetic data, right? So data that have been created, but it's very useful in a data strategy where you don't
Mm,
have enough data and you
mm,
need your data set. You can
mhm.
use LLM to
To
create
synthesize.
data for you so you can train machine learning algorithm on data that you don't have, right?
Right.
So for instance, if you have proprietary data that you want to train a machine learning algorithm in, you can use LLM to anonymize that data set.
Hmm.
So that your proprietary information or client name or PHI, PIH,
Mhm.
whatever, HIPAA compliant data set is anonymized and removed. And
Mhm.
LLM are great at doing that, right?
Mhm.
So that's one of those, unexpected use
Mhm.
of LLM. But yes, the growth of data when those large language models going to be trained on synthetic AI generated content, we don't know what's going to happen yet.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a really good point. So when you think about literacy and AI literacy and how I mean, again, everybody, someone said to me the other day, there's like everyone's an AI expert now, right? Like there's all these, consultancies and people and so on. And, I like to point out that I co-authored a book on IBM and Lotus's first foray into AI and machine learning back in 1998. It was on something called Lotus Discovery Server, which then became IBM OmniFind, and then that DNA went into Watson.
Yes.
And again, have been writing about this stuff recently. We used to call it text analytics, remember? There's now it's AI, but it was still the same principles, of
Yep.
doing that. And they used to say that in the 2000s there was a phrase, "No AI ever works," because as soon as it works, we call it something else, right? So AI by definition doesn't work. That was the saying back in the 2000s. But because word processing was AI, search always used AI, spell check was AI, speech recognition was AI. All of these things were using those algorithms, but word processing was one of the first applications. We don't say I'm going to use my AI to write this document, right? It was just became Word, but in just it took human expertise and put it into a program, into an algorithm. So that was considered AI at the time. But it's been around for a long time. But I think the bigger pieces that are more critical to this are the knowledge pieces, the knowledge and data hygiene and the socialization and the fact that we've been operationalizing knowledge management for companies for 25, 30 years, and that's the level of expertise that I think people don't realize that you need in order to make these things work, right? Because it does come back to that foundational stuff. Yes, you can layer on these different technologies in different ways. There are some nuances to it, but it comes back to the basic blocking and tackling of process analysis, data analysis, content curation, knowledge curation, all of those things that are very foundational. But I think I told you the story about the guy who said, "Oh, you don't need taxonomies, you don't need ontologies, you don't need metadata." I said, "Okay, what do you do with the data?" "Oh, you have to do data labeling." Well, data labeling is using metadata and it's based on an ontology. It's based on reference architecture. Anyway, but I think the critical thing now is, how should it, who should be educating executives? How should they be educated? And again, lots of vendors out there are offering these types of things, AI readiness assessments or AI strategic plans and so on. And the question is, if they're vendors, they have an agenda. There's some good sources out there, but what are your thoughts about how you already mentioned getting your hands dirty and going in and using some of those programs? Any other thoughts about how executives need to be educated? Obviously,
Yeah.
listening to podcasts like this,
The,
you know.
Yeah. So there's obviously a need, and I will repeat this, right? If you're an executive, you need to take it on. You
Mm,
have to become AI savvy. I won't
mhm.
say an AI expert, but you
Right.
have to understand the implication. You have to know what's out there. You have to be able to spell what an LLM is and explain
Yep.
what it does, right? And what it
Mhm.
doesn't specifically, right? Um, and you have to understand the pace of revolution and evolution, right?
Yep.
How do you do that? I think we talk about self-experimentation,
Mhm.
bring external folks. I know
Mhm.
you do that, Seth. I've done that in my consulting world. There's plenty of folks. There's tons of online services
Mhm.
that has short videos. But again, if you're an executive, you don't want to sit into a 2-hour video tutorial, but at 3 minutes, hey, this is understand the capability. Hey, did
Mhm.
you know you could do that? Right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Steph, can we have, can AI create a podcast of you and I speaking? Absolutely. We write the script, we throw it in AI, and it will be there, right? So, can you create a nice presentation with AI? Absolutely. There's a million ways to do that now, right? So you have to understand what's capable today. And I always say your baseline is to understand what's available today is the worst it's ever going to be. It's as bad as it's ever going to be, right? Which means it's only going to get better tomorrow.
Right.
When I say tomorrow, it could be next week, definitely not next year, right? So that's sort of your baseline. It's bad today. It's only going to get extremely so much better that you better fasten your seatbelt and get ready for it. So listen to podcasts. There's a lot of very short podcasts. I mean, I listen to the AI Breakdown, which is a 5 minutes a day. Google AI Breakdown. I think they rename it. It's the news of the day. It's often being reading pieces. There's a lot of mention. You can follow Ethan Mollick, who's a Wharton professor. He speaks about AI in business sense for executive. Find a resource you like. I wouldn't say listen to 20 podcasts. Pick one you like. I like the short version, the 5-10 minutes a day, right? And I know my news of the day. This is what's new or what's coming, or let's think about this, right? Some are very tactical. Here's the announcement of the week. And guess what? There's not a week without major announcement now, but and then get some help, right? And it's not just you as an executive, it's your team, right? You guys executive have to become extremely savvy and great at understanding the impact down the road. So education is critical. I think strategy is important, Seth, but you can't look at it over a 5-year period. It has to be okay, the next 12 months, and you have to be ready to adjust it every 3 months, right? Pivot quickly.
Yep. That's it. Those are great points. And it really starts with the business problem that you're trying to solve. AI is a shiny bit and it's cool, but what are you really trying to accomplish with your business, and what are you trying to impact in terms of a KPI, and what are you instrumented for? So it really has to be tied to those things. I just want to, and by the way, we'll put some of those resources in the show notes that you just mentioned. So you can send those URLs to us, and then we'll include them. So just a quick shifting of gears. I just wanted to know a little bit about you. What do you do for fun? What do you do outside of work? Tell us a little bit about
So
Daniel outside of the professional.
I mean, it's not technology, that's for sure, right? I mean,
right.
Share of it. I enjoy being with my kids. I have 4 kids and my wife. Luckily, my kids are still in the DC area, or even sort of graduated and working. I love cooking. This is sort of my outlet of getting away from technology. It's something that hopefully technology is not replacing, right? It's very inspirational for me. Love to travel. My wife is a travel advisor, so we get to travel a ton.
Wow. I'll have to call her.
Yeah, obviously I'll go back to Switzerland a lot.
Yeah, nice. That's great. Well, thank you again for being on the podcast and sharing your insights. We appreciate everyone tuning in and listening, and we'll certainly catch you on the next episodes of Early AI podcast. So Daniel, again, thank you so much for your time and for your expertise and your insights.
Thank you, Seth. It was so great to catch up with you, and I appreciate being on the show.
Yeah. And again, thank you for those who've tuned in. Thanks to the audience. If you learned something today or you enjoyed this, tell somebody about the podcast. And again, thank you, Daniel. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you, Seth.
Okay, until next time, we'll see you all on the next Early AI podcast. Bye now.
Visit Earley.com to find links to the full podcast on all audio platforms to listen on the go. Thank you for watching. Contact us today at info@earley.com.